A dying dog tied around his neck was exhausted, and people were shocked. Just as the sun was rising, the streets of a peaceful little neighborhood in Sao Paulo, Brazil, were bathed in a warm golden light. It was a normal morning until something startling caught the peace. There was a thin, malnourished dog attached to a light pole with a strong rope. The matting on the animal's hair revealed its ribs, and its eyes were lifeless and colorless. A throng of interested and alarmed neighbors soon gathered to witness the scene. They began to speculate about who may have done such a horrible deed, and whispers began to circulate. Clara, a young veterinarian who had just arrived to the area, was one of the spectators. Clara's sympathetic nature and sharp sight allowed her to see the dog's dreadful situation right away. She pushed through the crowd, her heart aching at the sight before her. "Poor thing," she murmured, kneeling beside the dog. The animal was barely conscious, its breathing shallow and labored. Clara's arrival had piqued the crowd's interest. "Do you know what you're doing?" a woman asked, her tone a mix of concern and doubt. "I'm a veterinarian," Clara replied calmly, her focus unwavering. She quickly examined the dog, noting its severe dehydration and malnutrition. "I need to get him to a clinic immediately," she said, looking up at the crowd. "Can someone help me untie this rope?" A young man stepped forward, his hands trembling as he worked to free the dog. The crowd watched in silence, the gravity of the situation sinking in. A massive smash reverberated down the passageway as the young man took a step forward. Everyone turned to see a figure with a knife-crazed eyes and was running at them. People began to scatter in all directions as a result of the man's insane yells. With his eyes fixed on the dog, the man charged and Clara's heart raced. The man cried out, his voice full of fury and desperation. "Get away from him!" Clara braced herself, holding the dog protectively, but the young guy untying the rope bounded forward before the man could get any closer. He threw the attacker to the ground with a rush of adrenaline, the knife slicing through the pavement. "Run!" he shouted to Clara as he struggled to restrain the man. As soon as the rope was removed, Clara gently lifted the dog into her arms. "I'm taking him to my clinic," she announced, her voice resolute. "I'll do everything I can to save him." As Clara hurried to her car, the murmurs of the crowd followed her. "Who would do such a thing?" one woman asked, her voice trembling. "Why would anyone abandon a dog like that?" These questions echoed in Clara's mind as she drove to the clinic. She glanced at the dog, now lying motionless on the seat beside her. "Hang in there, buddy," she whispered. "You're safe now." At the clinic, Clara worked swiftly, administering fluids and nutrients to stabilize the dog. The hours passed in a blur of activity as she fought to keep the animal alive. Her efforts paid off when by evening, the dog showed signs of improvement. He opened his eyes and looked at Clara, a glimmer of hope returning to his gaze. Clara sat beside him, gently stroking his head. "You're going to be okay," she said softly. "I'm calling you Lucky." Despite the small victory, Clara couldn't shake the disturbing questions. Who had abandoned Lucky and why? Determined to find answers, she decided to investigate. She began by talking to her neighbors, hoping to uncover any information about Lucky's past. However, her inquiries were met with vague responses and suspicious glances. Clara saw a shadowy figure following her one evening, as she was making her way home from another tedious day of chats that went nowhere. Her pulse increased and the tension in the air was palpable. She picked up the speed, but the figure followed suit, getting closer to her. Clara forced herself to remain composed as panic started to set in. In an attempt to elude her assailant, she ducked into a neighboring alley. The footsteps echoed through the little hallway, growing louder as she flattened herself against the damp, cold wall and held her breath. As the stranger turned the corner, Clara's heart pounded in her chest. Lucas was the one. He peered over his shoulder as if he expected someone to materialize behind him, his eyes wide with panic. Lucas took hold of Clara's arm and dragged her deeper into the shadows before she could reply. With a shaky voice, he said, "There's more going on here than you realize. But if you keep digging, you're going to end up in serious trouble." Her search led her to Lucas, a reclusive man who lived at the edge of the neighborhood. Lucas was known for keeping to himself, but Clara sensed he knew more than he let on. She approached his house, her determination is unwavering. "Lucas, do you know anything about the dog that was found this morning?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual. Lucas hesitated before answering, his eyes avoiding hers. I might have seen him around, he said slowly, but I don't know anything more. Clara nodded, sensing there was more to the story. If you think of anything, please let me know, she said, handing him her contact information. Lucky's life depends on it. Clara left unsettled by her suspicion that Lucas was keeping something from her. Long shadows were being cast across the empty street by the setting sun. Abruptly, there was a huge crash behind her, and then she heard rushed footsteps. With her heart racing, she turned to see a figure dashing out of Lucas's house and vanishing into the encroaching darkness. Clara instinctively pursued, breathing faster as she dashed through the winding, little streets. Even though the person moved quickly, Clara was determined to keep them close. The figure eventually stopped when it was cornered by a tall fence in an abandoned passageway where she was being pursued. The person turned to face Clara, who slowed down as she tried to gather her breath. It was a young woman, her face pale with fear. "Please don't hurt me," the woman whispered, glancing around nervously. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I know what's happening, but I'm too scared to say anything." Clara moved in closer, her tone becoming softer. "You're not required to be terrified. I only wish to support Lucky. Anything you are aware of could be important." After a moment of hesitation, the woman thrust a piece of paper into Clara's palm and hastily wrote something on it. She whispered, "This is all I can tell you," before running past Clara and out of sight into the darkness. Clara's hands were shaking when she glanced down at the paper. It was an address, a place on the outskirts of town that she had never been before. Her gut told her that this was an important lead, possibly the key to solving Lucky's abandonment mystery. She put the note in her pocket and made her way home. The shadows seemed to close in around her, and she knew there was no turning back now. Her instincts told her that the mystery of Lucky's abandonment was deeper than it appeared. Unbeknownst to her, this decision to dig deeper would unravel a web of secrets, drawing her into a dangerous game that would test her courage and compassion to their limits. As Clara sat beside Lucky in the quiet of her clinic, memories from her past flooded her mind. She had always been drawn to animals, their unconditional love and innocence providing solace in her turbulent life. Growing up, Clara had spent countless hours at her grandmother's farm, where she nurtured her passion for veterinary medicine. But it was a personal tragedy that truly shaped her path. Clara's thoughts drifted to her younger brother, David, who had been diagnosed with a rare illness. She had been a teenager then, watching helplessly as he battled for his life. Despite the doctor's best efforts, David passed away, leaving a void that Clara tried to fill by caring for animals. She had felt powerless to save her brother, but she vowed never to feel that helpless again. This vow had driven her to excel in her studies and pursue a career where she could make a difference. Her internal dialogue often circled back to David. "I couldn't save you, David," she whispered, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "But I can save Lucky. I won't fail him." These memories and internal struggles fueled her determination. She wasn't just saving Lucky, she was atoning for the past, seeking redemption in every life she saved. Her compassion was her strength, but it was also a burden she carried, a constant reminder of the brother she couldn't save. Clara was sitting at Lucky's side one rainy night when the clinic's power abruptly cut off, leaving the space in complete darkness. Clara felt a shudder run down her spine for a second as the wind howled outside, shaking the windows. The tension in the room increased as the flickering light from a nearby candle created unsettling shadows on the walls. With a low growl, Lucky alerted everyone with his pricked ears. There was a slight rustling outside the clinic, and Clara's heart raced. She reached for a flashlight and moved carefully toward the entrance, her thoughts buzzing with possibilities. Was there someone outside, or was it just the wind? As she reached the entrance, a flash of lightning illuminated the figure of a man standing just outside the window, his face obscured by the darkness. Startled, Clara took a step back, but the man didn't move. He seemed to be watching her, his presence unsettling. "Who's there?" Clara yelled, attempting to maintain a steady tone. The man didn't say anything, but she saw something familiar in the following bolt of lightning. The man was clutching a photograph. Clara was left terrified as he turned and vanished into the stormy night before she could respond. She shut the door swiftly and went back to Lucky, her thoughts full of questions. What had occurred moments ago? How come the man looked so familiar? Clara couldn't get rid of the unsettling notion that the strange guest had something to do with her past, even when the power flickered back on. She was now more motivated than ever to defend Lucky and find the truth after the experience. Clara's bond with Lucky grew stronger with each passing day. She devoted herself to his recovery, ensuring he received the best care. Lucky responded to her kindness, slowly regaining his strength. His eyes, once dull and lifeless, began to sparkle with hope. Clara took him for walks around the neighborhood, using these moments to connect with her new community. During one of these walks, Clara ran into Lucas again. This time, she noticed a flicker of recognition in Lucky's eyes as he saw Lucas. It was brief but undeniable. "Lucas," Clara called out. "I think Lucky remembers you." Lucas paused, his expression unreadable. "I told you I've seen him around," he replied, but Clara sensed a deeper connection. Determined to learn more, Clara invited Lucas for coffee. Initially reluctant, he eventually agreed. At the small cafe, Clara and Lucas sat in awkward silence until Clara decided to break the ice. "Why did you move here, Lucas?" she asked, genuinely curious. Lucas sighed, looking down at his cup. "I needed a fresh start," he said finally. "I had some issues in my past." Clara nodded, respecting his privacy. "We all have our reasons," she said softly. "I moved here to escape my own demons." Their shared sense of seeking refuge formed a tentative bond. Lucas began to open up, albeit slowly. Clara learned that he was a skilled carpenter, having left behind a complicated life in another part of São Paulo. He hinted at troubles but didn't elaborate. In return, Clara shared stories of her childhood, her love for animals, and her journey to becoming a veterinarian. As days turned into weeks, Clara and Lucas's friendship deepened. Lucas often visited the clinic, ostensibly to check on Lucky, but also to enjoy Clara's company. Clara appreciated his quiet support, sensing a kindred spirit in him. Yet the mystery surrounding Lucky lingered, and Clara couldn't shake the feeling that Lucas knew more than he was letting on. One evening, as they walked Lucky together, Clara broached the subject again. "Lucas, if there's anything you know about Lucky, please tell me," she urged. "He deserves to know the truth, and so do I." Lucas stopped walking, taking a deep breath. "Clara, I didn't want to involve you," he began, his voice heavy with regret. "But there's something you should know. Lucky wasn't just abandoned. He was deliberately left to die, and the person responsible is closer than you think." Clara's heart raced at Lucas's revelation. The quiet neighborhood of São Paulo suddenly seemed shrouded in a dark mystery. Clara knew that uncovering the truth about Lucky's past was just the beginning of a journey that would test her resolve and courage. And with Lucas by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. Clara's investigation into Lucky's past led her deeper into the fabric of the neighborhood, uncovering unsettling truths. She discovered that Lucky was not the only animal to suffer abuse. There was a disturbing pattern emerging. Several pets had gone missing or turned up injured over the past year, yet no one had connected the dots until now. Determined to protect the animals and expose the cruelty, Clara faced significant resistance. Many neighbors preferred to keep their secrets hidden, fearing the repercussions of exposing the truth. Clara's inquiries were met with cold stares and whispered warnings. The atmosphere grew tense, as if the entire neighborhood was conspiring to keep her in the dark. One particularly hostile encounter occurred with Mrs. Santos, an elderly woman who lived a few houses down from Clara. "Why can't you mind your own business?" Mrs. Santa snapped when Clara asked about her missing cat. "You're new here. You don't understand how things work." Clara's resolve only strengthened. She couldn't ignore the suffering of the animals or the indifference of the people around her. Her main conflict revolved around her struggle to break through the wall of silence and apathy while ensuring her own safety. The community's resistance was not just passive, it became increasingly hostile, putting Clara and her mission in direct danger. At the center of this turmoil was Lucas. Despite their growing friendship, Clara sensed he was withholding crucial information. His reluctance to fully open up was frustrating, yet she understood his fear. There was an unspoken threat that loomed over both of them, casting a shadow on their efforts to uncover the truth. The tension reached a boiling point. One stormy night, Clara was at the clinic, going over her notes on the cases of animal abuse. when she received an anonymous tip. The voice on the other end was distorted, but the message was clear. "Meet me at the old warehouse on the outskirts of town. Come alone if you want to know who hurt Lucky." Against her better judgment, Clara decided to go. She couldn't pass up the opportunity to get closer to the truth. Arriving at the dilapidated warehouse, she found Lucas waiting for her. "You!" she exclaimed, a mix of relief and confusion washing over her. "I didn't know how else to get you here," Lucas admitted, his face pale. "I have to tell you something, Clara. I've been trying to protect you." Before Clara could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Mr. Silva, the neighborhood handyman known for his erratic behavior. "So you've been snooping around, have you?" he sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. Lucas stepped protectively in front of Clara. "She has nothing to do with this, Silva. Leave her out of it." Silva laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "Too late for that. She knows too much now." In a shocking twist, Silva revealed that he had been the one tormenting the animals, using them as pawns in a twisted game to control the neighborhood through fear. His hatred stemmed from a deep-seated grudge against the community for ostracizing him due to his mental instability. Lucas had discovered Silva's secret months ago, but had been too afraid to act, fearing for his own safety and that of his neighbors. Clara's mind raced as Silva recounted his acts of cruelty with disturbing pride. She realized the depth of Lucas's fear and why he had remained silent for so long. Yet Silva's confidence proved to be his undoing. As he continued his monologue, Clara subtly dialed the police on her phone, which she had kept hidden in her pocket. The sound of approaching sirens finally broke Silva's tirade. Panicked, he attempted to flee, but Lucas tackled him to the ground, holding him until the police arrived. Silva was arrested, his reign of terror brought to an end. The revelation of Silva's actions and his arrest were major turning points in Clara's quest for justice. Lucas's bravery in confronting Silva, despite his fears, strengthened Clara's resolve. The neighborhood, once resistant and hostile, began to change. People who had been silent out of fear started to speak out, inspired by Clara and Lucas's courage. As Lucky continued to recover, he became a symbol of hope and resilience for the community. Clara and Lucas, now allies in their fight against cruelty, were determined to ensure that no more animals would suffer in their neighborhood. Their bond, forged in adversity, promised a brighter future for both the people and pets of São Paulo. The arrest of Mr. Silva should have brought relief, but instead it marked the beginning of a more intense struggle. Silva had allies, individuals within the community who had turned a blind eye to his actions or had been coerced into complicity. Clara's determination to protect the animals had now made her a target. One evening, Clara returned to her clinic to find it vandalized. Windows were shattered, medical supplies strewn across the floor, and spray-painted threats covered the walls. "Mind your business or else," one message read. Fear gripped her, but it quickly turned into resolve. She wouldn't let intimidation stop her from doing what was right. Lucas, hearing about the incident, rushed to the clinic. "This has gone too far, Clara," he said, his voice filled with concern. "We need to be careful." "I won't back down, Lucas," Clara replied, her eyes fierce with determination. "They can't scare me into silence." However, the threat escalated. One night, while Clara was home alone, she heard noises outside. Shadows moved across her windows, and the feeling of being watched grew unbearable. She called Lucas, who arrived just in time to confront a group of menacing figures lurking around her house. They fled, but the message was clear. Clara's safety was in jeopardy. The tension reached its peak when Clara received an anonymous tip that Silva's allies planned to harm Lucky as retribution. Panicked, she rushed to the clinic, only to find Lucas already there, standing guard. "I won't let them hurt him," Lucas vowed. Despite their precautions, one night, Clara woke to the sound of breaking glass. She ran to the clinic, finding it ablaze. Firefighters arrived quickly, but the damage was extensive. Clara, desperate, searched for Lucky among the chaos. She found him cowering in a corner, unharmed but terrified. Relief washed over her, but it was clear that the battle was far from over. The arson attack galvanized the community. Neighbors who had once been indifferent or hostile rallied around Clara. They helped rebuild the clinic and offered protection. The local authorities, now aware of the gravity of the situation, increased their presence in the neighborhood. Clara's ordeal also brought her closer to Lucas. Their shared experiences and mutual support forged a bond that went beyond friendship. Together, they organized community meetings, educating people about animal welfare and encouraging them to report any suspicious activities. During one such meeting, Clara finally confronted the elephant in the room. "Why did it take an arson attack for us to come together?" she asked, her voice strong, yet tinged with frustration. "We allowed fear and apathy to protect someone who brought nothing but harm. We can't let this happen again." Lucas stepped forward, echoing her sentiments. "We have a responsibility to protect the vulnerable, whether they're animals or people. Let's make our neighborhood a place where cruelty is not tolerated." The turning point came when a young woman named Anna, one of Silva's former allies, approached Clara with crucial information. "I was scared," Anna admitted, her voice trembling. "Silva threatened me and my family, but I can't stay silent anymore." She disclosed the identities of Silva's supporters and offered proof connecting him to more offenses. The police started a comprehensive investigation with the community's cooperation and Anna's testimony. Once several people were taken into custody, Silva's network of violence was taken down. Not only had Clara saved Lucky, but her unwavering pursuit of justice had also restored harmony to a community that had been living in terror. For Clara, the conflict settlement provided a sense of closure. After making a full recovery, Lucky became the neighborhood's most adored mascot. Many were inspired by his survival story. His served as a symbol of the community's resiliency. Clara's clinic, now a hub of activity and care, stood as a testament to her dedication and the power of collective action. In the aftermath, Clara and Lucas found themselves reflecting on their journey. "We did it," Lucas said one evening as they walked Lucky through the now peaceful streets. Clara smiled, looking at Lucky trotting happily beside them. "Yes, we did, and we'll keep doing it. This is just the beginning." Their bond, strengthened by adversity, hinted at a promising future, both personally and for the community. Together, they had turned a tale of cruelty and fear into one of hope and resilience, ensuring that the shadows of the past would no longer darken the streets of their neighborhood.